just like, yeah, understandably. Yeah, that's what John said, so no problem. I'm going to just talk quick. I'm not going to go over all we did. Just kind of talk about the focus of why we did it, how the approach we took, and kind of what we found. And he's going to, I want John to kind of wrap up with, we've done some things since spring with our students and some of the work we did, and talk about what we think the next steps could be if we could continue. Yep. Whatever. Keep it quick. There's a lot to talk about. They've gone really well. I'm very pleased. I keep telling my students this week, everybody, like, congratulations, we made it here. I mean, all my classes are in person, which has been fantastic. It's teaching online. That's the last spring, but I mean, we may be back there again. So never thought. We had a couple of students that had to quarantine or isolate early on. But we haven't had any students out really officially our other really finishing strong. So yeah, done. Now, a week from today is our last day of class. No, we look well actually where after actually all classes are done next Tuesday. And then we just have online phone. So that's all we have. My daughter's in Mankato. She has to go back for actually 1 week of class, online class. And the campus will be open for students and faculty, but no class will be in person. But they have 1 week of online classes and then 1 week of class. So everybody after Thanksgiving is a little bit different. We started early, which is nice. So we got 15-ish weeks. We started a little bit early, so we started on Wednesday. Then we had 14 weeks. We're ending on next Tuesday, so 15 weeks. Then we'll have our 15. Damn. Pretty close to a full semester. But it seems like it's been fixed. I was going back through, I'm like, I wish we'd have done this, we'd have done this, and then I look at all the things that we didn't get done. I'm like, okay.
We moved around again.
They feel like they've had plenty of time, I can tell you that. There's plenty, we all hammer
We'll begin in 1 minute. How's the view down there? All right. Call meeting to order. Please stand for the pledge. Good evening and welcome to the November 7th study session for your Brookings City Council. Ask Jake to record council attendance, please.
Council members, as we are not all in the same room, please respond with present as you hear your name called. Bacon? Councilmember Bacon, are you with us? Brink?
Present. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Collins?
Present.
Corbett?
Present.
Niemeyer?
Present.
Tilton Burn?
Present.
Wendell?
Present.
Okay, we have a quorum. I'd like to remind everybody that, because some people are calling in and some of us are here, when you're speaking, whether it be a council member, or public, or anyone, please just speak directly into the microphone, because I know people are having difficulty understanding sometimes and hearing. It is a challenge and something we always got to remind ourselves not to look off to the side or anything. So please look straight into the mic. Okay, I'd entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Brink?
Aye.
Collins?
Aye.
Corbett?
Aye.
Niemeyer?
Aye.
Tilton Burn?
Aye.
Wendell?
Aye.
Bacon?
Okay, thank you. Okay, this time we'll have open forum. Anyone care to speak to the council on a topic that's not on the agenda tonight? Not seeing anybody rush up here, so we'll just close the public forum. And this time I'll turn it over to City Engineer Jackie Lanning and her team there. We've got a pretty exciting presentation tonight. So,
Thank you. Tonight I'm happy to introduce Jeremiah Bergstrom, who is an instructor of landscape architecture at the SDSU School of Design, and Dr. John McMain, assistant professor and extension water management engineer from the SDSU Ag and Biosystems Engineering Department. And they're going to present to you their SDSU Green Stormwater Infrastructure Research Project.
great. I think both mics will work, so whichever.
Can you hear okay? That
Yep.
mic picking up?
Great, thank you.
All right, so I'll start off tonight. Again, my name is Jeremiah Bergstrom. I'm a licensed landscape architect. I'm an instructor at SDSU. I'm starting my... And my colleague, Dr. McMain, and I have been working over the past year and a half on stormwater management research efforts here in the city of Brookings related to a couple of grants that we secured. I have a background in water resources management as part of my my work in landscape architecture, and in trying to understand how we manage water in the land, and we understand the in the landscape have on how much water there is that we need to deal with, and how much infrastructure is going to be required to manage that excess stormwater. So if we think about a natural landscape, not a lot of rain actually runs off and becomes runoff or stormwater that needs to be managed. The trees soak it up, the soils use it, absorb it, infiltrate it. But as we begin to develop and build, we change those conditions. We alter that hydrologic cycle. And as we get more and more dense in terms of our built environment, we dramatically increase the amount of water that runs off the landscape. And as many of us know, that can contribute to flooding, nuisance issues, wet basements, and other concerns for property, as well as human health and safety. And so this is a really important issue and a concept that I want to get our students involved with. And so this grant and this project did that, allowed us to do that, and really used the city of Brookings as our classroom for that. And so we did that, and in collaborating with John, we really wanted to, hopefully at some point, begin to apply some of the knowledge that we learned and have our students actually begin to intervene and find out what that looked like. And so he'll talk a little bit at the end about how we've been doing that with some different practices. And so our goal was not to just look at peak flow runoff controls for major flooding, but also to understand that there's other requirements for reducing the amount of water that runs off, and also the quality of that water, so that it doesn't degrade our waterways anymore. And so that is where we come in with these landscape-based practices that communities are using across the country to help address some of these, in cost-effective ways, the issues of stormwater, flooding, and water quality issues. And so these landscape-based practices allow water to be absorbed, infiltrate, or be reused. And so looking at which of those practices are out there, which of them would be appropriate possibly here in the city of Brookings, and where could they possibly be? And so we went through a series of exercises to do that. And so these practices include things like shallow landscaped areas rather than berming the landscape, creating shallow depressions, letting water flow into those areas and be soaked up and used by plants and soils, changing our techniques for paving, allowing water to actually infiltrate through paved areas and be stored in underground stone storage reservoirs. Things like cisterns for harvesting water and reusing it, and also green roofs. These are just some of the technologies that are out there, and variations of these can be used and have been used successfully in many communities throughout the United States. So which of those do we think could be used, would be appropriate, and where could they be? And so that's what we started going into and looking at. And so when you're thinking about landscape-based strategies, you got to think about the soils. So we started looking at the soils. We mapped the soils. We had tested the soils. We evaluated them. Where do we have soils where we can maybe build green infrastructure practices that allow water to infiltrate into the ground? Look at the drainage patterns. We got some data from Jackie and our colleagues here at the city and how the drainage system works in the city. And so we mapped that. Then we looked at where do we have built structures that restrict the flow of water into the ground. And so we mapped all of the rights-of-ways. We mapped all of the rooftops. In this image here, it's kind of hard to see, but these are all of the road rights-of-ways. These are all of the rooftops mapped in the entire city of Brookings. And then we've identified which watersheds or drainage areas those are in, where they're going to contribute stormwater runoff directly to the storm sewer systems in each of these different networks. Because if we can begin to capture the water that flows off of our roads and over our rooftops and keep it out or slow it down from getting into our pipe system so quickly, we can reduce the pressure on that existing infrastructure. And that's what green infrastructure can do. And why that's really important is because our precipitation patterns have changed. This research, Dr. McMain pointed out to me, was done by one of his previous colleagues here at SDSU, Chris Hay, and he was looking at rainfall patterns in the past, in recent decades, because they were having issues with drain tiling and needs for drain tiling agricultural landscapes. And as I was reading this paper, I'm looking at it saying this is really important in how we think about stormwater management in the built environment as well. And so we're seeing rain come faster. We're seeing more rain, anywhere from 8 to 20% more rainfall and precipitation on an annual basis. We're seeing more precipitation in wintertime, and we're seeing more of these really intense storms of an inch or more happening on a regular basis. And these are the kind of storms, specifically, that green infrastructure practices can help us manage. Those nuisance storm events that happen in the summertime, we get an inch of rain, boom. It comes so fast, our system can't handle it, our pipes are too flat, our inlets aren't big enough, and there's just nowhere for that water to go. If we can hold that in the landscape, we can avoid some of that nuisance flooding. So these are the kinds of things that we're looking at, and then we're figuring out where can we do this. And so these are the maps, some of our maps of the soils where we think, in yellow here, where we think green infrastructure could be possible. And then we went back and combined all this together, and we said, okay, where do we have a lot of impervious cover, a lot of roads and rooftops that are draining directly into our pipe networks? And where can we put those? And so I have this you see here, this box around this 9, 10, and 11 basin IDs. I'll show you those on a map in a second. But you can see over here that they are over 40% covered with impervious surfaces. All the rainfall that falls on the roofs and roadways in these areas are going straight into our storm sewer system and contributing to flooding, and not necessarily flooding, but just exceeding, in many cases, in large events, the capacity of these systems to function. And so we map those. Where are those? And so you see in dark green here, those areas with really large quantities of impervious cover, where we have lots of water running off the landscape. It's not being absorbed by plants. It's not being infiltrated into the soil because we've covered it over with either roads or houses or rooftops. And those dark green areas are the areas where we think we have soils that may work, that may support green infrastructure strategies, as well as where we have a lot of connected impervious cover draining directly into our infrastructure systems. And so these are the places where we think we should start looking at the feasibility and the possibility of green stormwater infrastructure. Sorry about the funky shadows on this slide here. This is really a little bit difficult to read. But so our preliminary findings really say that, hey, there are some areas where we think these practices could work in the city. We don't want to focus a lot on infiltration. We did our soils analysis in the top 2 feet of soil. We can capture water in the top 2 feet of soil, but we're not going to get a lot of it very deep. We have a lot of clay underlying those soils. We're not going to get a lot of deep infiltration. So we need to design our systems so that we can actually hold that water for a short amount of time and then slowly release it back into our pipe networks and our infrastructure system after our peak flows are gone. And again, looking at the landscape as being very flat, that is very supportive of green stormwater infrastructure practices because you can spread that water out over time. And again, thinking about shallow practices rather than really deep, large storage systems, and having a number of small, distributed, and disconnected practices in the landscape throughout the city could be a really useful set of tools to help alleviate the pressure that we're seeing on some of the infrastructure here in the city of Brookings. So I will turn it over to Dr. McMain to kind of talk about where we've gone from here and what we've been doing.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremiah, and thanks again to you all for letting us come talk. It's a topic that we're very excited about, passionate about this. I'm excited about it too. So,
and Jackie told me I only had 15 minutes, so I had to really move. I'm sorry, I took almost 10. John.
That's all right.
Okay.
We'll get through it.
Okay.
We'll get through it. So we have done some work here in Brookings. I work with SD2 Extension, so kind of my primary role is to be as outreach to the community, and then I also have a research appointment too. So this spring, as part of another grant, we did a rainwater harvesting workshop. It was online, held it in partnership with McCrory Gardens as part of their Earth Day celebration. And then as part of that, we did a rain barrel distribution. So in Brookings and surrounding communities, there are 100 rain barrels that went out from this rain barrel distribution project. It was partially funded through the grant and then partially funded through each individual that bought one. And we also are doing, a partnership with the Boys and Girls Club, also through the grant with a rain barrel distribution, where we put in a rainwater harvesting system on their community garden shelter. Then we also built a rain garden. And so this is the rainwater harvesting system. It's about a 300-gallon tank, collects water off this relatively small roof, but then they can use that for watering, irrigation for the community garden there. And again, kind of get back to Jeremiah's point about a lot of the practices that we're putting in, it's focused on storage. So getting away from a runoff-dominated system, restoring that hydrology back to a storage or infiltration-dominated system. So this is the rain garden that we put in. It's collecting runoff from off of the parking lot and roof at the teen center at the Boys and Girls Club. We excavated this out, discovered a lot of clay. We did soil cores, so we expected that, and so as part of that, we incorporated some amendments, biochar, some sand into that. Then we also put in an underdrain. An underdrain basically allows us to do rain gardens and bioretention cells in cities like Brookings with high water tables and clay layers, because that gives the water a place to go. But kind of the big picture we see as opportunities for Brookings. first of all, Jeremiah and his team and we have done a lot of work to kind of identify opportunities through that, through the looking at the city of Brookings and soils and the stormwater infrastructure to identify opportunities for where we can put in these types of practices, where we can maybe incentivize practices. And then the other aspect would be to enhance on-site stormwater management requirements for new development and redevelopment projects. So a lot of times one of the big barriers for a developer would be, even if they're interested in something like green stormwater infrastructure, it may not be in the code. It may not even be something that they can think about doing. And then there's a lot of education that has to go on with that as well. And then some kind of next steps for research. One would be to further refine, identify feasible projects. So we've looked at the landscape, but then get down to the design details of what could be done in specific areas. Work with the city of Brookings to maybe put in some demonstration projects so it doesn't have to be driven by the city. It can be things that the city has put in that then become educational projects. Every successful demonstration project becomes an example of how something can be incorporated into other projects. And then part of that is to establish a monitoring program. So any demonstration projects that put in, we can measure flow, we can measure water quality to say, how well is this performing? How well are we doing at what we think we're doing? And then based on all that, recommend standards updates to allow any development and redevelopment to implement these types of practices. So through all this, again, bringing kind of newer practices, but really they are tried and true in a lot of similar areas. There's a lot in the Twin Cities. And so bringing these to the city of Brookings through a continued outreach, demonstration, and then monitoring, and then updating those standards. So that's all we've got, but we'd be happy to continue any discussion or any questions you all might have.
Councilman Wen.
Well, thank you both. I have a couple of follow-up questions. You had referenced opportunities with either new development or redevelopment projects. The idea of incorporating some green stormwater management practices into a redevelopment project intrigued me. How should we think of that differently than we would a brand new development that's kind of a blank canvas? Seems different than redevelopment. Can you think of some things we should be thinking about as we think about redevelopment in particular?
I mean, with redevelopment, you want to be concerned with what was on that site previously. If you're trying to put water into the ground or store water in the landscape, you want to be careful of where you do that. In my previous work, I looked at stormwater management on brownfield sites or other sites that had other activities that really aren't supportive of putting water into the ground for potential pollution issues. So when you're talking about redevelopment projects, doing it that way, but I mean, if it's a site that's has a clean bill of health, we're really looking for where can we capture that water in as close to the source as possible. Can we do it right in the parking lot? Can we do it? I believe some permeable paving is being done as part of the park redevelopment project down off Maderi by the high school. Some work's there. Can it be done there? Or should it be done and can it be integrated into the design of the landscape? And that can easily be, those things can easily be done if they're thought about at the conceptual level and the preliminary design level. You can begin to integrate those things in. It's much more difficult to think about green stormwater infrastructure if you wait and try to add it on at a very late stage in the design process, in the conceptual phase. For either a redevelopment project or a new project, bringing your developer and or their design team in and having a work session with them early on. Say, what are you looking at this for your site program, and saying, hey, can we consider or can you consider green stormwater infrastructure practices like this? And in the past, I've seen where communities have actually provided a flyer saying, these are the things we're looking to see happen, move forward. Can you consider these kinds of strategies? Let us know what your thoughts on that.
One thing I might add real quick, these two guys came and presented to our development review team, which is great, about 9 months ago before COVID hit us.
We
And we're gonna
finished this
reduce the
about
council a lot
January
earlier.
or February,
Yeah.
and then the
Great.
meeting in April kind of didn't happen.
And great discussion, because the development review team really looks at policy, redevelopment, development, and how can we incorporate things. And so from that discussion, if council remembers, we just brought forward a change to the buffer yards where you can add more landscaping. And that's an opportunity to your question and to what the discussion we had from the DRT, an opportunity to use your buffer yards for rain, best management practices, rain gardens with developers.
And
This,
so
this
another.
is Patty.
Hang on a minute, Patty. We got one more thing going on here. Just hang
Yeah,
on.
sorry. So one other example would be if you're looking at a street and you're tearing up the street to put in utilities or put in a bigger pipe system, while you have that street put up, that's a perfect opportunity to put in, a rain garden bump out or some type of permeable pavement shoulder or something like that. Because a lot of the cost, if it's already in there, comes in from having to tear everything up, put everything back in. But if that's already happening, then it's a very small additive cost to do it, to change the way it manages water on that site.
Councilman, go ahead.
Can
Finish.
I have a follow-up on when we think about some development projects, I think we have kind of embraced this idea that we can model some of these projects, or, when we do municipal projects, we can be an example. But as we work with private developers, have you seen examples of incentives that have been effective in other communities working with the private sector, trying to incentivize this type of activity?
I'll go first.
You go first.
So one example in Lexington, Kentucky, which is it's quite a bit bigger than Brookings, but so their stormwater utility is charged based on the amount of impervious surface that a commercial entity would have. And from that stormwater utility, it goes into funds that can then support construction of rain gardens or alternative stormwater management practices. And when that gets done, so it's a cost share type system, and then once that gets implemented, they can get a deduction in how much their stormwater fee is because they've removed impervious surface from what they're contributing, basically. So that's one example.
Putting a program in place and then being consistent in terms of how you apply it is really key to getting these kind of practices off and running in the private sector. There are no communities I'm aware of in South Dakota doing things like this right now. Most of the communities and areas that have these kinds of programs in place are under consent decrees through USEPA for violations of the Clean Water Act, and they've piloted these, some of them for decades. And so there's a lot of great research and material out there for us to look at and say, okay, what could work and what would work here, and then think about how we can implement that moving forward. But if you have some kind of an incentivized opportunity to say, hey, you can reduce, not eliminate, but reduce your stormwater fee by X percent if you do these types of practices, that is actually one of the best ways of trying to get these practices adopted by the private sector.
Councilmember Bacon.
Yes, and this kind of builds on the questions you've just answered. First of all, I want to thank you for doing all this research. I read the Guide to Greening Cities many years ago, and it had all this information in it, so I'm glad we're looking to the future here in Brookings. My one question is, since we have a city that's been sitting here with residential neighborhoods for a very long time, have you found any examples of incentivizing residential neighborhoods to put in the rainwater gardens, for instance, in the boulevard?
Yes, I've worked with communities in the past. There's different ways of incentivizing that. I've seen where they've done cost shares, where community members or homeowners come in. They get a reduced cost for the design and suggested locations for rain gardens, and then if they install them, they can receive a 50% reimbursement for their costs up to a set amount of dollars if they put in a rain garden as it was designed. It's a program that I participated in a couple different places. Other ideas for Because again, yeah, existing, and actually some of the priority areas that we identified in the presentation are existing and fairly an older residential areas. And those are the areas where we need to think about how can we make that happen. And so incentives are one of the ways to begin moving that forward. It requires a lot of education up front, as well as a commitment to, to assisting property owners with these practices over time.
And I would say just changing how people think about landscaping, because really every house that you drive by has some type of landscaping in it, and a rain garden would be landscaping. And so they've already put in an investment, or they are investing in landscaping. So it's just changing, it's adding function to the landscape instead of just having it as aesthetics. And so you're getting ecosystem services of water quality and water quantity and perhaps pollinators and things like that too.
It can be as simple as just redirecting downspouts in some ways, keeping it away from your basement, your neighbor's basement, but still trying not to put it right onto the driveway every time if you don't have to.
Any other questions? Councilman Wendell?
Mayor Corbett.
Go ahead.
This is Holly. I want to echo the sentiments that I'm very thankful that you guys have put this together. I've been one that has used rain barrels. I've made some rain barrels, so it's really exciting to see that those have been implemented kind of around our community. I'm wondering if in your opinion, it is just as important for folks to do things in their own yards like rain barrels as it is for us to do things from an infrastructure standpoint.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And that's a kind of philosophical discussion that I've had with a lot of students and colleagues. And so we've actually, a recent master student, she's finishing up this semester. She did some modeling looking at, okay, if we looked at residential redevelopment, adding green and stormwater infrastructure there, versus if we looked at kind of the institutional opportunities, city buildings, parking lots, versus if we looked at commercial. And really any can have an impact. So I'm not going to give you a great answer because I'm going to say that there's opportunities in all three. But really it just comes about how we think about, again, incentivizing those things, who bears the burden, if you will, and then who can implement those to have an impact. So really any could work, and maybe it's all three to some degree that can more completely address the issues.
Thank you.
Okay, Councilman Wendell.
I've got another question. This one I think is for Dr. McMain. I was really interested in the grant program you talked about with the rain barrels. Did you say that 100 rain barrels were distributed in Brookings this spring? Do you have was part of the project, I'm wondering, tracking like water usage for those recipients of the rain barrels, or what their behaviors were around the rain barrels, or benefits they had in usage? Yeah,
so we didn't, it was a mini grant, so we didn't have that as one of the objectives. That would be fascinating to look at, because that's the other aspect of rain barrels, is there's potentially a reduction in potable water use. But no, so that we didn't look at kind of any behavior change, but that would be something interesting to look at.
I ask because I'm thinking this is kind of in the spirit of Councilmember Tilton Burns' question around, should we be focusing on, municipal projects versus individual behaviors? And it sounds like a combination would be good. How do we encourage and incentivize individual behaviors? Do you have a sense of the cost of a rain barrel, just individually?
So the ones that we distributed, we got wholesale for about $45 a rain barrel, and these retail for $90, I think. So
rain barrels retail for about $90 to $100, give or take, or more if you want some fancy ones. So they retail about that.
And that is a picture of actually some that are actually put in. So they're really nice. They come with the hardware you need, and we charge $25 for the recipient, and then had the other part from the grant.
Mayor Corbett.
I would just note real quick.
Let city manager had a comment here.
I would just note real quick, I was in another community in Kansas, and they had this similar program, and what the city would do would provide $10,000, and K-State University would provide the manpower to build these things out of the barrels. And then they would sell them to people throughout the community for $20, a very nominal fee. But there they utilized the water funds because it was reducing the overall usage of water and is used for gardens. And there
I've
they
worked
had a
on
lack
several
of water.
programs like that
Yeah,
in
but-
collaboration with other municipalities where they provide funding on a given year. Like a $10,000 project will allow us to do programs like that. You purchase the barrels up front. You charge a small fee because we don't like to give people things for free, because then they actually see some value in it, and we deliver the programs, we do some follow-up, and go from there for things like that. It's
And so what I'm getting at is that there's opportunities, I think, here where the city could collaborate with the university to really make these programs go a lot further throughout our community.
Councilmember Tilton Burn, did you have something else?
Yes, so just a quick note, one of the things that I did when I was a student at SDSU was build these rain barrels as part of a club project. And I think to build them, it was extremely simple. And I think materials in total cost about $15. So if folks want to build them, I think we went off of a how-to guide that Extension had put out all those years ago. I won't say back when I graduated from SDSU, but I'm sure that guide still exists somewhere if there are folks in the community that would like to build their own. It's fairly simple to do. And perhaps we could, again, partner with one of the SDSU clubs like we did and get some of these built. I do have another question, and that is, as we kind of look at the project that's being done at Bob Sheldon that you had referred to, the new permeable surface that we are having implemented there, what should we be looking for in that project to see if it's successful, to see if there were maybe things that we should have done differently? How should we be evaluating that?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I think it's important. I'm glad you're thinking about that now. So one thing that you can do is a really simple thing is do infiltration tests after it's put in, maybe at key times. So whatever the maintenance plan is as far as cleaning goes, maybe do before cleaning, after cleaning. So then you know kind of performance, and from that you can extrapolate results of if you had so many square feet of surface area, and you're able to infiltrate a certain depth of water in a certain amount of time, then you can extrapolate that to say the volume that you could reduce in runoff. And so, but looking at infiltration over time, that's going to be the biggest thing. Permeable pavement, sediment is the kind of bane of permeable pavement's existence, and so making sure that's maintained, but being able to quantify the effects of maintenance and kind of how it performs over time is pretty straightforward.
Thank you. City Manager?
Yeah, John or Jeremiah, if you could you go back to that slide that shows the green areas? Yeah, so what's interesting, Council, what's great about what the work these folks did is they used student help to go out and take measurements throughout the community, and this is some GIS data that I assume we have access to.
Yeah, I had a student do this GIS mapping for me.
So it shows
I
you
wasn't gonna map all
areas
those
that
rooftops.
maybe we should concentrate on, especially as you redevelop, areas that maybe don't drain as well. And so when they came and presented to our development review team, one of the questions we had was, well, how well will our Bob Sheldon project work? How well will our project here at the Sitco building, which we're going to have a rain garden here just south of here, are these the appropriate areas? And how well will they work in here? And we were told that because of this is in this green shaded area, it will work fine. And in fact, that's what we should be looking at. One of the questions I had was, this is a very dense area. And so you talk about roofs, streets, infrastructure. But how does density play into it?
Well, I was in this analysis, I looked at the density as a key source of water and contributing to, a lot of pressure on the existing system. And so, the prevalence, not say density so much, it's the prevalence of impervious surfaces in the right of way and in the streets. And so for me, this is the easiest place, easiest locations to begin to find, for us to begin looking where we can, alter drainage patterns and hopefully find some and maximize the benefits and the function of ever remaining landscape we have. And again, as Dr. Main said, trying to add value to that landscape so that it's not just a lawn, it's a lawn that infiltrates. It's not just a landscape bed of perennials, it's a shallow depression that captures water when it rains to reduce the pressure on there. So we can make the landscape more functional within these areas. I just felt like this was the low-hanging fruit for where we see a lot of this. Not that we shouldn't look in all the other areas, but again, this is where, we have a lot of impervious cover, dense land uses that could, as they're redeveloped, as they're updated, as new projects come online, we really should think about integrating these types of practices into those projects.
Any other questions? Thank you, gentlemen. This is really good. Will this be uploaded to our city website, the presentation? Great, thank you. I know I'm going to get emails asking that, so.
Well, I mean, just in closing, I mean, if it's okay with the council and Jackie and the city manager, we would be eager to develop a proposal, scope of work to discuss with you about things that we could do to kind of formalize or keep moving this forward. If that's something we could talk about, I'd be glad to do that.
Yeah, I think that'd be exciting, so.
Okay.
And again, the idea of using SDSU and students is something I really applaud, so.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. That was really
Thank you very much.
very, very interesting. Next, I'll turn it over to the Assistant City Manager, Jake Meschke, for a presentation on Engage Brookings.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the City Council. Jake Meschke, Assistant City Manager, going to provide a quick presentation on Engage Brookings, which is powered by SeeClickFix. Starting off with the function diverse and multi-use platform. As you'll see, one of the primary functions of this is to receive and manage non-emergency service requests. It does expand the use of public engagement, focusing on customer service, responsiveness, and connectivity to the community. We are able to provide easy access to information and multiple resources, including our social media updates on COVID-19, as well as a feature where they can directly call City Hall through the app if they so choose. It does provide benefits to us as staff as well in terms of facilitating workflow and communication. It does serve as a work order management system for us as staff, and it allows us to provide residents with progress updates on these service requests throughout the process, letting them know that, number one, we've received and acknowledged their request, let them know the progress on the work order itself, and then eventually close it out with a resolution. It allows us to make data-driven and strategic decisions through the use of analyzing reports and key metrics in terms of our service, and it also allows us to send proactive communications, kind of like a push notification. If you subscribe to any news sources, it'll be that breaking news thing. We have the ability to do that for folks who have downloaded our app to let them know about pertinent events as they happen. So first and foremost, where can you find this service? And it does exist in multiple locations. It is available on the front page of our website. It's in those buttons there, the report a concern, and that is the Engage Brookings logo there on the lower left-hand side of the screen as we look at it. Additionally, the easiest way and best way for most of our residents to utilize this feature is going to be through a mobile application. It is available on Android and iPhone and easily downloaded just by searching Engage Brookings, and that is the most user-friendly way to use the platform. So one of the main functions of this, as we mentioned, is the service request feature and providing that connectivity to staff. It really provides efficiencies for the resident and staff in terms of the olden way, I guess, would be to pick up the phone and call and let an office manager know that there's a pothole that then gets routed to the department head, who then routes it to the appropriate personnel, so on and so forth. Eventually, we go back and close that loop with the resident to say, yes, that pothole is filled. Now we have the ability, just through a service request through the mobile app, they can select whatever type of service request they need. It gets routed directly to the appropriate individual who can act on that immediately without going through those multiple channels. That individual is now getting those notifications back through email and their mobile device, letting them know that the progress is made. So it cuts out a lot of steps, takes away the post-it notes and the pass-along notes, and allows us to get right to those services in a much quicker fashion. At this time, we do have 17 what we dub public-facing requests. So as a member of the public, right now you have access to 17 different request types for different services that the city does perform. Again, there is an internal benefit to this, as we do have internal requests only that we utilize as staff for IT needs, if there's any issues that we're having there, as well as facility maintenance. So if we see that there's something in one of our buildings, we can put that request into our chief building official to put that onto his workflow. This slide before you here kind of provides a little bit of the usage facts that we've had so far. So to date, we've had a total of 580 downloads of the app on different devices, 396 on Apple devices and 184 on Android. Thus far, staff has addressed 646 total service requests. I will note that we've had this live since just March of this year, so we're actually seeing good utilization of this very early on. You'll see our 6 most common service requests there, with the number 1 being the collection cart. For context, last I heard we had done about 3,000 deliveries of carts or so about 10% of those did come in through this mobile request. You will also note that as staff, we do utilize this ourselves for the IT requests, and that is how we're able to really speed up the efficiencies with our IT staff and help them kind of prioritize and troubleshoot items as they come up. One of the next steps as staff that we want to start to focus on is focusing on how we compare to our peer communities. So there are about 350 member communities at last count who also use this platform. It's a great source of information and data for us to see how we stack up as a community. I've been hesitant to make that comparison as of yet because we are in that ramp up period, and I want to make sure that we get enough users active and we get our staff properly trained so that when we make those comparisons, we've had that break-in period, if you will. Once we start going into a full year and into the second year, then is the time we can start making those more meaningful comparisons, allow us to benchmark with our peers, similar sized communities, and see if we have an opportunity to improve our customer service or our responsiveness, as well as continually monitoring the type of service requests we have available if we can expand the utilization of the platform. Here are some of the data and analytics that we have the ability to pull from this platform. So those top 6 requests that we had covered in the previous slide actually represent 87% of all the requests that we have received. So out of that 646 of them, 87% of those come in those top 6 most common categories. So you'll see some statistics here that I just want to give a little bit of background on. That days to acknowledge, so as a service request comes in, the staff member receives it, they go into the system on the back end and physically change the status of that request to acknowledge. That essentially is just a message to the resident: we've received your request. An auto-generated email goes back to the resident or the service request submitter stating that, saying we've acknowledged this request. We have a nice canned message that says staff is investigating, we're working on this, and we're taking the next steps on it. Days to close is when we go back in and we put in that status, we change it from acknowledged, now we're moving it to closed. And this is where we have that resolution that says, thank you for submitting your request, it has been resolved, and we have a pre-canned message in there asking them to take a survey, sharing their feedback. As you'll see, our days to acknowledge, we're actually making that acknowledgement in less than 1 day, which is a fantastic response by our staff to let folks know that we are on top of it, we're aware, and we're making those progress. And our average day to close in those top 6 requests is just under 5 days. Those are 5 calendar days. You'll see a statistic up there that we are 73% closed with an SLA. SLA stands for Service Level Agreement. And what that is it's a predetermined time frame that we say we will generally complete that request in. Our standard is 7 days, so 1 week. Essentially for all of our requests, we say within 1 week of receipt, our goal is that we're going to have that resolved, and that's just a standard kind of preset time. And as you'll see, 73%, our top 3 there, as you'll notice in the picture, the screenshot that's included, our top 3 are in the high 90s. So very quick response, very high rate of getting those done within that SLA period. One of the things we've done is a best practice that it doesn't come as part of this platform, but we're able to piggyback a different platform through SurveyMonkey. We actually created a survey that's open all the time. It goes out with every closure notification to the resident, asking them to provide feedback. So we always want to cross-check our results. How easy was it to use the platform? How was our responsiveness? How was our customer service? Would you recommend this to other users and other residents? Being fully transparent, we've only had 7 responses so far, but of the 7 that we've gotten, this response has been well. I think to myself that I can get a free dilly bar at Dairy Queen if I take their survey and it still doesn't entice me, and unfortunately we don't give dilly bars away, so we will continue to work and see if there's ways we can encourage taking that survey, but there's different limited tools at our disposal. Back on track, you will see of the folks who have taken our survey, most are generally very happy. 71% were satisfied overall. And then 86%, which is 6 out of 7, was very satisfied with responsiveness, platform's ease of use, and likely to recommend Engage Brookings to other. One caveat I'd put in here is that we don't want to detract from the platform if folks aren't happy with the resolution. As city staff, we strive to provide the best resolution that we possibly can, with the understanding that the resolution may not be ideal for the submitter in all cases. So really what we want to focus on is, were we responsive? Did we provide good customer service? Was it easy to use, and all of those things? And almost the outcome, we want to make sure that it meets their needs, but if it doesn't, we want the whole process to be smooth for those individuals as they use this platform. One of the features that we want to start to utilize more frequently is the mapping of these requests. So this is actually an Esri GIS map, which is the same platform that we utilize for our GIS mapping system in the Brookings, or for the city of Brookings. So there's a good integration here. You can kind of start to see a cluster map of the different areas of the community where we're seeing those most common responsives. You'll see that, right here in the City Hall, City County Government Center, we have 144 of them, which is our largest bubble. As you kind of dive in on this map, those go to individual addresses, but as you zoom out, they kind of cluster by area. So as you go in and you get a lot more detail. The feature, or the use of this feature, is really to let us know what's happening in our neighborhoods. If we start to see particular trends, that there are speeding concerns or snow removal concerns in certain neighborhoods, we can now try to be a little bit more proactive and ask the question, why? Why are we seeing speeding here, or why are we seeing snow removal consistently questions coming in this neighborhood? So it allows us as a staff to, again, use that data-driven decision-making model to start to do that proactive service. So with all that being said, it is a feature that has been in place since March. We're continually learning. We continually want to evolve it. We do know that we have a number of next steps. First and foremost, it's continue to marketing this. We want to get more and more users. So as we put out push notifications, it's reaching a wider audience. We want our residents to be able to utilize this to ease of staff use, but also for them so that we're able to get to their service request much more quickly and much more efficiently. So again, we want to continue marketing that through social media. We recently did put a mailer out in a BMU utility bill advertising this as a COVID-related feature if they have questions about COVID-19. We've got some stickers that we're making for bumper stickers, as well as different branded materials and swag that we kind of have in the works that we want to continue to utilize to promote this platform. The next item up there is request refinement. What that means is we may need to pare down the number of service requests. So we currently have 17 of them. After we get a year in, go back and look at, for example, the airport one hasn't been utilized yet. It was a good idea, but if we're not seeing the utilization of that, it may not be as useful, and we can kind of lump that into something else. Whereas we have a stormwater request where we do want to keep that one, but we want to see it used more often. So that kind of goes back to a marketing perspective and getting folks to utilize that functionality. We want to promote our strategic partnerships. One of the things that we do is we get a fair amount of requests for streetlights. So we've been engaging with Brookings Municipal Utilities to see if we could get them onto this platform with us and be able to directly route streetlights to BMU and get that feedback from them. Because right now our capacity is we make a phone call, let BMU know that we got one, and then we really hand it over to them. So to be more cohesive among our partners in the community, we're trying to get them on this platform as well so that we can work together and better collaborate. Of course, we always want to provide refresher training to our staff, engage them, get that from the user experience on their end as well to hear, we want it to work well for our community, but we want it to work well for our staff members so that it's efficient, it's not a burden, and it is truly making their jobs and their customer service easier. And then lastly, the opposite of paring it down is how do we expand it? So how do we look at, are there other services out there that are prone to expansion for this? One opportunity may be a fleet management program in the future that we could do a fleet service request for, whether it be police squads, parks equipment, streets equipment, so on and so forth, to let the mechanic know, I need an oil change, I need routine maintenance, things of that nature. So it's just finding the sweet spot and continuing to learn, follow the data, and make this as valuable of a tool for the community as well as our staff. With that, I'd be happy to entertain any questions.
Any questions? Councilman?
Data and analytics, Jake. So responses, or do you respond back to them with, like, the pothole's been fixed or something like that, or?
Yep. Acknowledge the days closed, that's really when staff is completing the work that they're having. So the acknowledgement is telling the resident, we've received this, we're working on it, closed. Really during that time frame, that's when staff is working. As far as the communication, we do have the ability to add additional comments, which will then go out as notifications or emails. So it depends on the situation. So if we're working on taking a tree down and maybe we broke a saw or something like that and we didn't get there quite as quickly as we thought, we'll put that comment out there and just say, hey, we're going to circle back to this. We didn't forget about it. If it's just standard workflow, we'll probably just let it ride until it's done. We do also have, and I apologize if this is a little confusing, but we have that service level agreement. There's also a due date. And the due date is originally set to align with that service level agreement. We can change the due date. And we never want to have these requests get overdue. Like that basically goes to the resident, reflects on us that we haven't completed this in the time frame that we've set. We do have the ability to change that due date, and that's when we want to again communicate to say, something happened or this is a non-standard event. We're still working on it. We're going to complete it. But again, the key component is the communication, to always let the resident know what's happening, when they can expect it to be resolved, and always be proactive in that communication.
Thanks, Jake.
Councilman Wendell?
Jake, did you note that there's been 646 downloads? That was user requests.
There's 646 service requests. There's been 580 downloads of the platform.
Does the provider, so one of the things I'm really interested in is the mapping ability to kind of analyze where the requests are coming from and look at the neighborhoods and maybe do some long range decision making around what we're seeing. Does the provider give us some sense of, I know 580 users isn't really enough to get to a volume where you can use it real analytically. What is a goal number where we really can start using that mapping function because we've got such a volume of users that it can drive some of our decision making? Do we have a sense of what that number looks like in a community our size?
My initial reaction is more. You always want more users. That is a really good question. That's something we could follow up on. I guess I would probably almost look at some of our friends from SDSU and say it turns into a surveying tool where it's like, what is your representative number? Where if we have a population of X, what point do we hit a number that it's representative of the entire population? So it almost becomes an academic exercise that we could follow up on and see, are we getting a true representative sample with something like this? I think the one thing where I always get a little bit cautious here, kind of from that academic side, is that there's a certain type of user that's going to download this app. It's not random. It's you're making that physical choice to download the application, and that's probably going to appeal to a certain type of user versus necessarily an average resident. So there's always going to be that caveat there, but I think it is a good point, and I think it's something that we could probably approach either through the provider or as well as with SDSU and make it more of an academic exercise to make sure or determine if there is a possible for this to be representative of the community as a whole.
Any other questions?
Mayor Corbett?
Yes, go ahead, please.
This is Holly, and I am just curious to know, are we seeing with some of these requests and some of the usage of it, are we having repeat users or are we having new users? Is it a mix of both?
It's a mix of both. We certainly see some repeat users, potentially, I don't want to call them single issue users, but they'll get they'll be looking for one type of service request and they may find it in different segments of the community, so we see repeat that way. Sometimes in certain neighborhoods we've seen repeat parking offenses, so they will the trailer or the car will come back, so we'll start to see that again. So we do see some repeat users, but not too frequently. It does happen, but it is a mix of repeat and new.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you, Jake. Now I have an update on the Bob Sheldon Public Art Commission project. Dusty Rodick and Darla Beal.
Good evening. My main purpose for being up here is just to introduce maybe the most hardworking chair of any volunteer commission I've ever been around, Darla Beal.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me be here tonight. So we start this. There we go. Okay. So my main purpose tonight is to kind of exciting work that we've been doing on the Public Arts Commission. And I would just like to first take us back to when the Public Arts Commission was formed by City Council. I think it was in 2016. And what there were two ordinances, one which established the Public Arts Fund, and then the second which established the Public Arts Commission to kind of oversee and make recommendations for that fund. This is a 1% for the arts program, and Brookings should be very proud that we had the foresight, or the city had the foresight, to be the only municipality in South Dakota with a codified 1% for the arts program. So these are not new. What they do is they take 1% of public generated funds and then put that back into the built environment and the public infrastructure in order to enhance the lived experience of residents and visitors. So we do have this public art fund, and as a commission, we try to use or make recommendations for part of those funds each year to go into the maintenance of city-owned art. For example, there was a wooden sculpture in Hillcrest Park that needed some repair, and so those repair funds came out of the public arts. We're looking now at the brass sculpture over by the police department, and then the Little Professor on Main Street. There's a sculpture with similar material on the campus of SDSU, and it gets a maintenance schedule once a year of a cleaning and a wax sealant. That, to my knowledge, has never been done on those two sculptures that the city of Brookings owns. So part of our fund, and we're gonna add those to the maintenance schedule, hopefully. So part of that fund that's generated goes to maintain what we already own, and to make sure that it's enjoyable for years to come to the public. Part of the Public Arts Fund then goes to smaller projects in the guidelines we established and that the City Council approved. There's a certain budget level where we can do smaller projects without bringing them before council. And so an example of that is the glass mosaic mural that's in this building, the City County building that was just recently went in. And then we have the third category of our budget expenditures goes to these long-range, more expensive projects that take maybe multiple years of budgeting. So we spend a little bit each year, and then we kind of like set some aside and kind of budget for longer-range projects that are really going to have lasting impact. And ideally, we do those in partnership and kind of alongside with other projects that the city, capital projects that the city's already doing. So this Bob Sheldon project is going to be the first one that you'll see come before you, because it's like I said, it's at a budget level where it will need to have a contract that's approved by City Council. So what is public art? So public art, when I'm talking about it tonight, it's temporary or permanent elements of public space designed by an artist or artist team. You can read the rest of that, but I really want to make a distinction between public art and art that is in public places. And so in Brookings, we have a wonderful mix of both. We have some art that anybody can see that's available to the public. But when I say public art, we're really talking about city-owned public space, because these are, like I said, city-generated, tax-generated funds that are then going to go back into that infrastructure. The idea, this is just an example of a public art project through the City of Aurora, Colorado's Public Arts Commission, or their program. And so the idea is, if you're going to build something, you might as well make it really beautiful and attractive, and so that when people come, they notice it. So for the Bob Sheldon Field, here is a recreation center, right? They had to build a window, and so they incorporated stained glass into that. With the Bob Sheldon Field, we know that that's going to need some sort of entryway. It's going to need something to kind of mark the entry. So we really set out to find a project that would make the entryway interesting and be something that everybody could enjoy. These are just two links. This is our Public Arts Commission documents, and then the guidelines. The guidelines were developed with a lot of professional input, even going up to the national best practices and some ethics guidelines. And then we worked with a woman named Susan Pontius, who is the San Francisco Director of Public Art, and she was at the time on the Public Arts Committee with the American for the Arts. So I just want to say that, like, Brookings didn't make this up. You know, we didn't just make it up, but it's actually evidence-based and best practices. So in those guidelines, there's an acquisition policy in a section, and so that's what meant that we had to follow it. So one of the things that we had to do after the commission decided that they wanted to budget money and move forward with making a recommendation for Bob Sheldon, we formed an art selection panel. There's people on here that are on the Public Arts Commission itself, as well as some who are just community members and stakeholders. Cody Wright, for example, is the president of Friends of Baseball. Scott Wallace is himself a public artist and is now retired, but was with the SDSU School of Design. So Ashley Ragsdale, of course, executive director, Brookings Arts Council. So a lot of different people in the community. So our process, we met, we wrote the request for qualifications, kind of outlined what we thought would be good project goals. And we used a platform that's nationally known. It's called Call for Entry, or CAFE, and it's often used by public artists to find projects. We worked with the city to put out press releases and kind of, make sure it was as widely available as possible. We did have 71 artists and teams respond from all over the country. We had one international one, and they were very high quality. There was none that I honestly looked at and thought, no, absolutely no way. I mean, they were all very high quality. So the first thing we did, within that CAFE system, we're able to set up a blind jury process where each panelist can go in independently and kind of put their comments in and their judging. So we did round one, yes, no, maybe. We eliminated the 50 lowest candidates. We kept 21. And then we ranked those numerically, and we had a couple meetings where we kind of talked about, okay, we were originally going to invite 3 to submit full proposals, but we finally settled on 4 that we thought would be good candidates for this project to invite to do a full proposal. Those 4 invited artists then had a month to complete full proposals. And then we had Zoom meetings, I think 45 minutes with each of them maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And really the engagement of that arts selection panel for a group of volunteers was just amazing. They spent a lot of time and a lot of thought into who to recommend. So these are the 4 artists that you see. And this bottom one, Jennifer Madden and Jeff Reed, is the artist that we unanimously wanted to go ahead with. We thought their project was well suited to Brookings. And so I think I said all this. Okay, and then so we unanimously recommended Reed Madden to the Public Arts Commission, who then also unanimously voted to move it forward to the Brookings City Council. So this is going to come before you with a, what's the word I'm looking for?
Service agreement.
Contract, yeah, with the contract at an upcoming City Council meeting. And so here is what it looks like. It is it's 24 feet tall. We wanted to have something that people could see when they were driving by on Maderi, and also something that they would really notice when they were walking in. It would mark the entryway. It's 24 feet tall, 30 feet wide. The ball that's bouncing there is going to be right over the entryway. So as people walk in, that ball will be directly overhead, 17 feet tall. And then on the other side, there's that mitt that's stained concrete, and then it has a sealant on it that's like 12 and a half feet wide, 12 and a half feet square, so kids will be able to kind of wait if they're waiting for games or sitting there. The sculpture is called Play Ball, and so we anticipate, using marketing, the city's marketing, to create a hashtag Play Ball Brookings. We think it's going to be something fun and whimsical that people will take pictures of, post on, talk about when they're coming to town for games. And so this is a proposal this is the one that you're going to see coming before you. So with that, I'll entertain any questions, or Dusty can help.
Just to reiterate, the purpose of a study session is the same, that you kind of percolate a little bit, and this will come back to the council in December for possible action. So.
Yeah. One thing I should say, that bounce will have lights, I think we'll have lights in it, kind of running lights, so at night it'll also be illuminated a little bit. The figures you see aren't part of the design, right? They're just there for scale. That was their mock-up. So up at top, yeah.
You must have heard Councilman Niemeyer ask me that before the meeting.
Yeah. Yeah. So it'll just be the stainless steel bounce and the ball and then the
And the
mitt.
mitt.
And then real people.
That might impede traffic.
Any questions?
Mayor Corbett,
Yes, please, go ahead.
this is Leah. And thank you to the Public Arts Commission and to Parks Department for bringing this to us tonight. It's very exciting. I just have one question, because a sculpture of that size and scale, I just wonder, have there been any discussions related to how we'll keep it, I don't know, free from vandalism in terms of its lifespan? I would hate to see
Sure.
people in there at night, you know, or any thoughts on the construction of the materials such that it won't maybe be subject to that?
Yeah, no, those are really good questions. So we do, as part of the proposal, they had to submit a maintenance plan, and we did talk, you know, about that was minimal, the stainless steel, and then the ceiling on the mitt itself. I don't know, Dusty, you want to say anything about that?
Really about the only other deterrent would be the parking lot lighting. Will hopefully discourage any vandalism. I mean, we did look at the material content, and you know, I specifically asked about the mitt and those sort of things, and it is stained concrete with a sealant, so we'll just hope people play nice.
Thank you.
The bounce itself is stainless steel, so it should be relatively maintenance-free. And then the ball is hand-hammered stainless steel as well, and then the white is automotive paint. So it should be pretty impervious to the elements.
Any other questions, council? Or I think this is pretty exciting, and as we were going through this, looking at it, it's pretty exciting. Is that a question you have, Holly? I guess her kids are substituting for her.
Council members on the phone, if you can mute yourself when you're not talking, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Oh,
I
no,
believe that's Councilmember Bacon trying to speak, and I think she's having some interference on her line.
okay. I thought you were letting your kids speak for you tonight, so. Okay,
No, definitely not.
okay. All right, well, thank you very much. We'll see you again in December.
Thank you.
All right, next. I have Tom Richter, the director of the Swift Health Center, and Eric Rangel, our CFO, speak to Swift Health Center. Or Eric, you standing by, or just, okay. Good evening, Tom.
Good evening, Council and Mayor. Thank you for the opportunity to present to you tonight at this study session. It's hard to believe it's been 9 months since the last study session I was at. Seems like a lifetime ago. Our world's been turned upside down since then. What seemed like the biggest concerns then hardly hit the radar now compared to what our community has dealt with and continuing to battle. The council, you have had to make some extremely challenging decisions for our community, and I respect your decisions and commend your efforts. We all know that Swift Health Center business was impacted and was one of the first industries to close down and will likely be one of the last to fully recover from the pandemic. We will recover from this, and by hosting events, we will help our community recover, making Brookings strong in the end. There were questions raised at the February study session about our strategic planning, developing new revenue streams, and what marketing campaigns we are pursuing. In tonight's presentation, I will attempt to answer these questions and show how we have modified our business plan to attain a balanced 2020 budget. I want to use this opportunity to review how our team at Swift Health Center has adjusted to COVID-19. Specifically, I'll talk about 3 events we hosted in July. And finally, I will present a new formed group we call the Economic Impact Study Group and what we are engaging them to do. Let's start with a time frame. In March, our team started working directly with the team at ICAP, who produces the 60-plus dining program, to prepare frozen meals for the elderly in our community. In total, we produced 4,000 meals. At our last study session, the council specifically wanted us to note ways in which we can bring in additional revenue sources. These ICAP meals are an example of how our team is constantly evaluating the market, looking for opportunities to generate new events, and leveraging our talents. Those meals were made and revenue was brought into our facility, all during a time we were closed to the public. In April, we secured $250,000 through the PPP CARES Act. This was possible because VenueWorks is a private management company, and we applied for and received these funds on behalf of the city. In May, we met with the Charolais Cattle Show that we bid on and secured years ago, and confirmed the event details with them, and we all decided that we could go forward with that event safely, even with the concerns of COVID. When that word got out that the Charolais Show was going forward in Brookings, our phone started ringing. We ended up negotiating and booking 2 additional cattle shows, which were slated to happen in other states. The Simmental Show is such a big show that our facility would not even be considered normally because we're too small for their needs. However, because of COVID-19 shutdowns, they had no place to host their event, and we pulled it off. Our team held countless strategic planning sessions on how we would pull off these events. We created maps, plans, had to connect with local vendors, purchase equipment, and we even drove our own vehicles around the state and region getting cattle panels for this event. Again, this is an example of how our team is constantly pursuing new events and new opportunities for revenue for the city. In June, we reopened the Swiftel Center safely with our health safety program, new signage, and enhanced sanitizing protocols. In July, we hosted the cattle shows. In September, another opportunity for us to keep people employed presented itself. We were successful in bidding on the disinfecting services of city facilities, the police department, fire department, and city hall. Because of VenueWorks' quick action in purchasing electrostatic sprayers back in March when the pandemic hit, we were able to bid on this service and create a new revenue stream. Finally, I thought it was interesting to note that since reopening in June, we have safely and successfully hosted nearly 50 events. I wanted to also highlight some of the challenging decisions we've had to make throughout the course of the pandemic. At the beginning of this whole thing, we knew it was going to greatly affect our business. In order to achieve a balanced budget, we implemented Plan A in March. This included furloughing 339 seasonal staff, freezing 2 of our full-time positions, suspended our 401 retirement match, no cost of living increases for our full-time staff, canceling or suspending all our maintenance and service contracts, and significantly cutting expenses, including our marketing campaigns. All that to say, our full-time team has really stepped up to fill in everywhere in our facility. We all have made and served food, we've all set up and tore down events, and we all cleaned and disinfected our facility. When the situation continued without improvement and still being tasked with achieving a balanced budget, we implemented Plan B in September. We were thinking outside the box. Everything was on the table. This included furloughing 2 of our full-time staff until the end of the year, reducing hours for 2 other full-time staff, furloughing the remaining staff for a minimum of 3 weeks between now and the end of the year, and implementing salary rollbacks for myself and our associate director. We will also be closing the facility to the public for 3 weeks to save more costs. At our last council meeting, council asked about cutting expenses. This is an example of that in action. We have furloughed these staff members, and it's relevant to discuss because we are now operating the facility the same we did when we had 13 full-time people, but now have 7. The remaining staff members have taken on additional responsibilities to be able to cover the hours, the events, and still book new events. We reopened the facility in June, and we implemented our health safety program that our team in Brookings created. We started setting up and preparing for the July cattle shows. In July, we hosted the Charolais National Junior Show, the Simmental National Junior Show, and the Minnesota Holstein and Jersey shows. At this point, I'd like to show a video that Banner and Associates produced for us of one of the shows. In our community that were impacted from hosting not only these events, but all events that we host at Swiftel Center, and got some testimonials. This is from Papa John's. And because of the events held at the Swiftel Center in July, we were actually 30% positive in sales for the month. This was from Runnings. I can honestly say we saw a large increase in sales over this time and confidently say it was correlated with the shows you put on. From Cubbies, we had a 15% increase in business. Comfort Inn and Suites. Brookings had a better July in 2020 than July of 2019. We finished around 20% better than last year. This is a personal testimonial from attendee of the Charolais show. Even though this location is a little over 1,000 miles from my home, I'd be happy to have this Charolais show there every year due to the small town atmosphere, lack of congestion, plenty of parking, friendly staff, and many other great things. And the staff was amongst the best I have ever seen in 40 years of traveling to cattle shows. They were pleasant and extremely adaptable and accommodating. This slide here shows the tax revenue in the third B collection and the bid tax, the pillow tax. The slide on the left, the green line represents 2020 and the gray line 2019. And you can see, and this is a month behind. So actually where the dip in the third penny tax collection in May is actually April. So April was a low point. And then it slowly started rebounding, and we hit and exceeded 2019 numbers in August, but actually in July when these events took place. The bid tax revenue, the next graph, Same thing, the green line is 2020. And you can see again in May, but really April, hit a low point and climbed back and maintained in July into August the 2019 year-over-year numbers. This graph is a little bit busy, but the green line again is 2020 and the gray line is 2019. And it's showing the hotel occupancy rate per day in Brookings. The bottom line is the days of the month of July, and the occupancy rate is on the left-hand side. So there's a few things I want to point out here. There's a peak around the 8th and 9th of July, and that's when the Junior Charlet show was here. And we were reaching nearly 90% occupancy. And then another peak, the 14th and 15th, when the Simmental show was here. And a third peak, although smaller, when the Holstein show was here. And then the declines on the 19th and the 26th, those were weekends as well, but we did not have any events going on at Swiftel Center. And then the other two things, in the 2019, you can see there's two peaks, one around July 12th and 13th, and the other one around the 19th and 20th. And those correspond with weekends we also hosted events at Swiftel Center. We have reached out to the economic experts in our community and business leaders and asked them to get involved with us and work on figuring out the economic impact of events on our community. We created a survey in collaboration with the BEDC, Brookings Chamber, and Visit Brookings. We took the opportunity of surveying and gathering as much information as we could on the Charlet and Simmental events in July. It was a unique situation, which we hope we never see again, but these events were the only big events taking place in Brookings in July. There's no arts festival, no youth tournaments, no SDSU events. We currently have 11 people working on this project, and they are from the BEDC, Al Houghton, Andrew Sloss, and Christy Larson. From Visit Brookings, Laura Shane Cabernow. From East Brookings Business Industry Association, Al Kurtenbach and Clint Johnson. From First Bank and Trust, Al Baker, Eric from the CFO of the city, and a few members from our team. Whoops, that should not have been in there. This slide shows the impact, the economic impact, using the Visit Brookings economic impact formula on our community. And the Visit Brookings group were very instrumental in us recruiting these events to Brookings. The Charlet show was estimated to have a $1.1 million impact. The Simmental 1.5, and the Holstein Jersey show 163,000. Next steps. The Economic Impact Study Group will continue to meet and evaluate survey information gathered from these and other events, tax revenue collected, hotel occupancy rates, and other data to draw conclusions about the specific economic impact the events hosted at Swiftel Center have on our community. We hope to draw some conclusions that show the full impact the Swiftel Center has on our community and show the rate of return for the city on the investment. We would like to request to come back to a future City Council study session and present our findings. I would like to thank Paul and Eric and Mike Struck and members of my team for helping to prepare this presentation. And I'd like to open it up for questions you may have and things you'd like the Economic Impact Group to look at over the next several months.
You and your team, instead of rolling over playing dead, you refuse to do that. And if you read the testimonials, a number of those people have visited with me also. It was fun reading them because same comments they made to me about the impact the Swiftel Center and your team had on Brookings during that tough time. So again, thank your team because I appreciate what they've done. So, Council, anybody have questions? Oh, Councilman Niemeyer.
So, do you have any rebookings from any of these events that you had then, Tom? Are they possibly having some of these next year again?
Yeah, our whole goal was to get our foot in the door and get one of these events to bring it to Brookings. No one and be the first event, but the Junior Charlet show did. And then luckily, a good thing that came out of COVID, we booked the other two events right behind that. And we are currently talking with the Charlet group to come back. The last time they held this show in South Dakota was 10 years ago, but they're looking to come back in 5. They had such a good experience. The Simmental show, like I mentioned, it's too big for us to handle, but we are in negotiations with them, even though you saw in the video all the tents on the east side of the building. We had cattle in there, and that's not desirable. But if we can figure out a way to use some more square footage in the current facilities we have, we may be in the running to get that event. We just bid the Galvey National Junior Show, and we're in communication with a couple other shows that we're trying to get. But our goal, once we got the Charlet show booked, was to get one of these events a year in the summertime of the national junior shows, because they're the real big events. And they typically happen in the months of June and July, which is ideal for our ice is usually out of the Larson Ice Center, and we need that facility at that time. But we're also always looking for other opportunities for agricultural type events. We just held 2 cattle sales this past weekend, and we had 2 goat shows and sales this fall as well. So we're always trying to recruit those type of events.
Council, any questions? Or Councilman Wendell?
I just have a comment for you and your team, Tom. I guess I'd be remiss in not acknowledging it. I think when we were together in February, I think we understood at the time that there was some resetting happening in the live event industry, in particular for mid-sized cities. And then COVID emerged, and it's like it just wiped the canvas completely clean. And I think, given what you've shared with us tonight and what we've known about you and your team, I do feel like we're well positioned to rebuild from whatever comes next in a post-COVID environment. I think that's a tremendous credit to the culture of the team you have built at Swiftel. And I think that predates COVID to some extent. I mean, I think your staff and your facility met some challenges in the last couple of years as the live event industry shifted. I think you all have been change able and ready. I think this put you to an even greater test. And I'm just really happy we had an opportunity to hear from you and hear some data behind some of the things you implemented in the last couple of months. It is interesting timing because we did have some discussions in February that I think, we were looking for what the map forward looks like. I understand that we don't know what that map forward looks like, but this gives me a lot of confidence that we're going to figure out what it looks like with the team you've built there and the culture you've built there. And the only other note that I would provide is, as a representative, not just of the Swiftel Center, but of Venue Works, I really appreciate hearing directly from you. I think the presentation you shared this evening and the way you captured what's happening in our community tells me that, just know that when we ask to hear from the Swiftel Center and Venue Works, I really like hearing from you. I think you encapsulated this nicely tonight, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for the comments, and you've heard me say it before, our staff is second to none in the world, and I mean that every time I say it. And they're fully vested and engaged in what we do, and I couldn't do it without them. I've been blessed, and we have a great team.
Mayor Corbett?
Yes, please go ahead.
This is Holly, and I also want to commend you for the work that you've done. I think that some of the creative things that you've come up with doing, for example, doing the meals and the electrostatic sprayers and utilization of those, I think has been really outside of the box thinking. And I think that in order to survive, especially in those early months of COVID, that was certainly something that was necessary. And it was great to see you and your team be very nimble and able to do that. I'm wondering if there was anything you did kind of early on or have done throughout all of this that was atypical to your previous operations, like the electrostatic sprayers, that you plan to maybe continue to do because they've been maybe easy things to do or good revenue boosters for you, just things that maybe you wouldn't have thought about doing pre-COVID.
Thank you, Member Tilton. Yes, we have several things. I mentioned in my presentation that everything's on the table and we're thinking outside the box, and we never imagined that we'd be spraying, disinfecting facilities, but we're experts at that now. And we have a list of other things that Paul and Eric and I are going to be working on for potential revenue generating and other opportunities for the future, near future, going forward. Our management agreement is up for renewal in July, and maybe some of that might be figured into that. We haven't started those conversations yet, but we're eager to, and we're really thinking outside the box. That's all I want to comment on that tonight, and hopefully in the future you'll hear more of some of the things that we may pursue.
I think that's really great, and I think as you kind of go forward evaluating the economic impact, that the Swift Health Center has, I think incorporating even some of those non-event things into it, if you do plan to continue them long-term, would be fun to kind of analyze and see what you guys have planned down the road.
We have been really encouraged and are very excited with the involvement with leaders in our community. We're experts at producing events and managing buildings, but we're not experts at explaining and understanding and telling everybody what the economic impact is. That's why we've employed consultants to do that and other people. But we brought a group from our community together, and Eric is awesome on there to help. We have a former CFO of Fishback Financial. We have a founder of one of the world leading companies in the world, Al Kurtenbach, Clint Johnson in the back of the room, Laura back there, and then the people from BEDC. We're going to come back with some good information for you, and hopefully they'll present it in a few months when we get that gathered.
Councilman Collins, did you have something?
Yeah, Tom, just looking at like the economic impact, that just blew my mind. I didn't think it was going to be that much, but it really was. And I think a lot of that attributes to you. And I remember being out there this last summer and watching people come up to you and tell you how good of a job you were doing and how well they liked it here in Brookings and how well they liked doing their stuff here. And I think that attributes to you, and I think you've done a great job. So thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you. I caught some of what you said, Councilmember Collins. I have a tough time hearing and with the mass and everything. Hopefully I can go back and watch this and hear those comments because I think they're really nice. And I hope one thing that I would like is I hope that in the packet we put some other testimonials and thank you letters from people that attended the events. And we'll have many, many more from the surveys we gathered. It will blow your mind, the comments that we got, not only from our staff in the Swiftdale Center, but our community. And we've got something to be proud of. And this is something that's really exciting in tough times, because we are in tough times, and my staff, and we don't know day to day what's going to happen. But this is really exciting, and I'm very happy that we could present this to you tonight. So.
Councilman Niemeyer.
So I used to show cattle when I was a kid, and I'm just kind of looking at the whole layout that was going on there. Up all these fans. Do you have the facility or the capability in that facility to handle all those cords and wires? And did you have to bring in generators at all, Tom?
That are a lot brighter and smarter than I and have more skills. And Jeremy from our staff created all that power distribution. It was phenomenal. But the most phenomenal thing is that we can translate it to a trade show or to a concert. And so we can use it in multiple spaces, not just for the cattle shows. And so my staff, we just all came together and we spent hours planning, and we started bringing it all together and we executed it. But it was an undertaking. We purchased a lot of that equipment over the past 2 years, gearing up for the Charlet show. But with the Simmentals, that brought on a whole nother level. and we had to rent an awful lot of stuff to get power out into those tents. But I have to give most of the credit there to Jeremy and our staff, and not only him, but he was kind of the brains behind that part of it.
Any other questions?
I should mention Kleitz helped us out quite a bit too, Mike at Kleitz Electric as well.
That saved you getting a phone call? That way you didn't get a phone call?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you very much.
Council, looking ahead to next week, 6 o'clock meeting, we'll have a resolution on declaring items as surplus, volunteer board appointments. That time of the year for liquor and wine renewals. We'll have the Mayor's Generational Leadership Award. And then we'll have a proclamation on Small Business Saturday, which is immediately following Thanksgiving. Change orders, 2 second readings, progress report by Jake. You got it already, Jake? I thought so. And then a COVID update report by our city manager. Anything next week or the future coming up in December? We'll hear back on
Mayor Corbett?
Yes, please.
This is Holly, and I think previously at other study sessions, I may have asked about this, but is it possible for us to get all of the presentations that our study session presenters kind of provide in our packets ahead of time? I know in the past that was something that we asked of our presenters to provide, but it would make it far easier to kind of follow the presentations if they were either included in the packet or provided ahead of time.
City manager's going to answer that one.
Yeah, if they're available, we certainly can. A lot of times our staff are pressed for time, and we're lucky to even get the memos done in time for the packet. So we'll definitely try to do that if they're available. If not, we'll make sure they're included in the packet after the meeting as well.
So the ones I'm thinking about are definitely perhaps the ones, I guess, that aren't staff heavy. So I would assume that the one that we heard even just from Tom, as long as he provided that to us in advance. I know previously, in previous years, we would actually require that presenters have that kind of information to us, so many days in advance so they could be published. And if we could return to that practice, I think it would be helpful, not only for us on council, but for the public to follow along as well.
I would just have to comment once again, if they're available, we certainly can. If not, we'll make sure they're part of the packet. Once again, there's a lot of effort and work that goes into these presentations and the materials. I know a lot of times our staff and those people that they're working with outside are overly taxed. If council makes that a requirement, we can certainly make that happen, but your presentations and the information is going to greatly diminish. This is an opportunity to really work with those that are bringing this information forward. Once again, it's up to the council, what you guys would like to see. We'll try to do whatever we can to help meet
see what we can
your
get
guys'
done on
needs.
that then. Good. Anything else for future meetings or agendas? All right, council, entertain a motion to adjourn. We have a
Second.
motion. Do we have a second? All in favor say aye.
Aye.